Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the SPA's Complaints and Conduct Committee. So I think, should I drop off today, the governance support team will let everybody know, and the meeting will be paused until I get back on the call, because as I understand, we need all three of us today to be quorate. So we have all the usual attendees and suspects on the call this morning, which is good. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Lynn, this is your first meeting in your new role. So welcome very much to the committee.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And we also have colleagues from PERC and HMICS on the call as well. So welcome to those colleagues. So in terms of apologies, Angela Leach is an apology today. And then I'm moving through the agenda. Right, so declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from anybody in relation to today's agenda? I see none, so we can record that. And I have not been notified of any other business either. So moving on, in accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders, can I please invite the members to agree taking agenda items 12 to 16 in private? Again, I see colleagues agreeing, so that's good. Right, which takes us onto the minutes and actions from the previous meeting. Can I please invite members to approve the draft minute of the Complaints and Conduct Committee from the 27th of February 2025 as an accurate record of the committee? And I see no dissent and nodding, very good, so we're content to approve that. And can I please invite members to approve the draft public minute from the private meeting with the Complaints and Conduct Committee on the 27th of February? And again, I see no dissent, so I take that as approval. Okay, so then we have got the action log and matters arising. And if I flip to that, I see we have got 4 actions which are proposed ongoing, so I don't think we need to discuss them. As such, updates have been provided for some of them. And then we've got 3 that are proposed for closure. Are there any comments on that? So I think, the first one, sorry, let's just step through the ones that are proposed for closure just really quickly. So obviously there was an Operation Glade one, which was from the 27th of February, and there was an Operation Glade related action. If I remember correctly, it's a 6-stage audit. So firstly, sorry, apologies members, I'm just jumping around a little bit. So the action 2025-2702, so Operation Glade related one from last from the last committee meeting. Are members content with the closure of that? We do have Operation Glade report under item 6, and we also have had amendments made to the performance report under item 3. I mean, by the time we get to those agenda items, we may want to raise some additional actions, but at this stage, the way I think the action reads, are members content to close? I think members are. Good. And then the 2 other ones that were raised during the November meeting last year, again, one was in relation to data. And I know that there has been a standalone survey report, which is attached to the action log. So thank you very much to Police Scotland colleagues for providing that. Are members content to approve the closure of this action? Yeah, fantastic, thank you. And then the last action which is proposed for closure is the PERC 6-stage process audit action improvement plan. And again, additional information to discharge this action has been included in Operation Glade report under item 6. And as I say, by the time we get to that stage, we may well have additional questions or requests. But I think at this stage, our members content to close this particular action. Yeah, okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Okay, in terms of, so moving on with the agenda under 2.4, in terms of any decisions taken since last meeting, I think there have been none. So that's fine. Okay, and that enables us to then move into the first substantive item of our committee agenda, and that is the Police Scotland Professional Standards Performance Report. And I believe, Lynn, you are down to speak to it. So over to you, please.
Chair, may I just check that everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Grand. Thank you. Thank you very much. Morning, Chair. Good morning, committee. If I may, I will sort of draw out some high-level observations in and around the report, which I'll take as read. And then, as I understand, is common practice, given that it's my first appearance at the committee, Helen will go into some more of the specifics of the report. So, on page 1, obviously, it provides there a summary of our preventions activity, which is a really important part of the professionalism programme, and we include in there the standard and the misconduct outcomes that we've included in the appendices, the joint PSD and PERC training, plus the progress on the PECS bill, which I know we'll discuss later on as well. I think across pages 2 and 3, that gives us a very succinct illustration in a holistic way, I think, Chair, of the significant and high-risk demand being managed across PSD, ACU and vetting. And then, as you've referenced, we'll speak a bit more about Operation Glade in specific agenda item number 6. But as outlined in page 5 of our report, you will see there that we've had an exceptionally busy Q1 and Q2 in terms of complaints, which was in line with a particularly busy year in 2023 and 2024, where the trends there were also very high. But it has levelled out somewhat in Q3 and Q4, such that we're now more aligned in line with the 5-year average. And as the report indicates, there have been 637 complaints received year to date, down 9% from the previous year to date, but only a 2.5 decrease from the 5-year average. And then as we move further into the report, I would just draw attention to pages 15 and 16, which I think are really important in terms of illustrating the ongoing commitment to the organisational learning within PSD, with some proactivity around rolling out divisional learning in respect of DSIs and complaint handling. And I know that members the committee will have some questions, I've no doubt, in and around the complaints piece in particular. Happy to address any of those, but as you say, we'll speak about them specifically in the Op Glade update. And if I may, I will hand over to Helen for anything in particular note that she would care to draw out, Chair, if you're comfortable for me to do that.
Please, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, ACC. So working through the report and sort of picking up where the ACC had taken us to in relation to page 5 in the report, I would just highlight, and as often happens when we come to committee, we will rerun our data in relation to the volume of complaints recorded within Q4, because as we've seen before, there is often a slight time lag in relation to that recording part as matters are worked through. So I would just like to update the committee that our final sort of number looking at the end of Q4 is 678 caps, so it is an increase of 150 as shown on the report, but given the current position that we are in, that will give us a good indication of the end of figure number in relation to the volume of complaints within that, and as the ACC has outlined, that sort of levelling off in terms of the volume following what was an extremely busy 23-24 and the start of 24-25 in relation to Q1 and 2. So I was keen to provide that updated figure to the committee, which sees a 6.9% decrease from the previous year to date and a 0.3 decrease from the 5-year average. So it brings us back into line in terms of that. Moving it further into the report, I would just highlight in relation to the FLR rate at 49.6%, which is a slight decrease on the previous year to date, but we do have further opportunity, second opportunities to FLR these as we work through some of the volume that we have at the moment in terms of that. So we do expect that rate to rise slightly in relation to that. And I would highlight that there is an increase in the FLR by our NCARU team. I think that that's a positive indication, a rise from 45.3% to 48% year to date. That really reflects that early engagement point with complainants and the early resolution of matters, which clearly we continue to try and prioritise and work through. Just to touch on a couple of the key points throughout the further detail in the report, the complaints received broken down into each of the geographical areas. There is a little bit of detail where we have seen some of the areas in terms of the reductions and the complaints overall across the east, north and west. The west is noted to have registered a 2.6% increase in complaints, mainly driven by increases in Greater Glasgow and Ayrshire, and most of them linked to excessive force and discriminatory behaviour, which I will then touch on later within our emerging trends section as I talk through those. And then chart 3, just to highlight that, does give you the last 8 quarters in terms of volume, just recognising that the figure for Q4 should now be sitting at 1,405 in respect of that, but a good chart that shows you the volume broken down into each of our quarters. Now moving on to page 7 and our emerging trends. And I'll touch firstly on discriminatory behaviour. Now we have spoken at this at a number of committees recently, and obviously there is an action that is ongoing as we are liaising with our Policing Together colleagues around that. But as previously mentioned, it does remain at an elevated level, although kind of low volume across all of our category, across all of our complaints. But clearly we are keeping a close eye and monitoring that as it sits at 165 received year to date. I don't intend to go into any more detail, but clearly happy to take any questions. And as I say, we will be bringing back to a future committee following our engagement with our Policing Together colleagues around their review of our matters. The next emerging trend I would draw out is the excessive force. So 672 allegations of excessive force received year to date, which is an increase of 127 on the previous year to date. This is most influenced by increases in the North East, Ayrshire and Greater Glasgow. And just to give you a little bit more detail around one of those, so we did a review in terms of the North East Division during the year to date, which was 65 allegations, which is a 28 increase from the previous year to date. The key themes were as follows. So it included the arm, which was 32 of them, and most of those related to the application of handcuffs, being the most frequent issue, which was 17 of those matters, with the main theme being the tightness of handcuffs being applied. In addition, some of the key general themes included the body in general, and the most cited reason for that was being pushed in relation to the excessive force. And then there were also 9 that were unspecified. Now the reason for that would be potentially the lack of detail provided or the complainant withdrawing, but clearly we continue to review and monitor in those in relation to that. And some other areas included kind of the legs and clothing, but again, none of those stood out in terms of the high volume. So I've touched on the high volume ones there. Moving on to the next emerging trend would be the incivility allegations, but they are at a decreased volume compared to the 5-year average, but we do recognise that they remain the second highest category in terms of allegations within complaints. So clearly we continue to monitor those levels and link in with the divisions where we are seeing the increases that have been noted. In terms of the next emerging trend, the policy and procedure, in particular policing policy, where we've seen an increase from the previous year to date and the 5-year average as noted in the report. These allegations mainly relate to quality of service, but again, we would work with divisions in relation to that and ensure that's fed through. And finally, in terms of emerging trends, the irregularity in procedure allegations and the 5 increases within the subtypes have been listed within the report for your awareness. At this time, we haven't done any further deeper dive, but clearly happy to be revisited should the committee seek any further context. And as is our approach, we continue to monitor the volumes of these allegations working through. Moving on, just highlight that the chart 8 does display the full breakdown of allegations year to date. And as I say, we continue to monitor and review those. Looking at page 10 in relation to service delivery, we just highlight that allegations upheld are at a very slightly increased rate at 15.9%, albeit this is relatively stable compared to the previous year to date of 15.1%, and the 5-year average at 15.1%. But again, the data is shared there within the report for the committee's awareness in relation to that. Analysis of any themes or trends of upheld complaints are discussed at our Preventions and Professionalism Ops group, and then consideration as to whether we could link some of those in within either the standard publication or any further prevention messages or training or action that is required around that. And we continue to link in and promote that. Within the service delivery, there is also reference within the report, as the committee will see, to the timescales compliance in relation to that. We are noting a very slight increase in terms of the complaints closed within the 56 days. My reflections on that is that it does relate to some of the work that we're doing, the work that we're doing within the Operation Glade, and some of the structuring and realigning some of the work within our NCARU team that saw our NCARU take on some of our category B and C matters after the FLR attempt, which has led to therefore some positive impact in terms of that. But it is very much a holistic picture throughout all of that work, and I know that we'll talk further on Operation Glade later in the meeting. I would just highlight in there the improvement in terms of the CHR performance as well, with a 62.3% of allegations found by PERC to have been handled to a reasonable standard, which is an increase in our previous year to date. However, the volume of CHRs does remain low, with only 1.9% of complaints reported as subject to a CHR matter. Just touching on a couple of further points within there, we have included new charts within page 11 linked to the matters awaiting review by the NCARU team at the end of each month. Sorry, that's chart 12, and chart 11 that gives the outline and the breakdown in relation to the unallocated queue as requested by the committee at previous meetings in respect of that. The PERC referrals are then listed in the report. We have reported on the 342 statutory referrals over the year, which is an increase in previous year to date from 300 referrals, albeit noting that the volume taken for investigation is sitting at 8.2% of those matters referred through the statutory referrals. Some of the increases seen there have been linked to serious injury following police contact, with the key themes there would be individuals sustaining injuries evading the arrest by officers, in particular falling from height in relation to those where the key patterns identified there in both E Division and the Lothians and Scottish Borders, which where the increases were recognised. I will just touch briefly on the Article 3 referrals and the matters, the 347 that have been passed to PERC as they do for the Article 3 referrals in relation to that. The majority of the referrals were concluded as no criminality, but we are clearly, as we've spoken about before, seeing the increase in volume of investigations related to the changes of law in corroboration, and that's really started to be noticed within Q4 in relation to the Article 3 matters being taken forward in respect of that, and the increase on matters taken to investigation, although in terms of clearly that they were all kind of being referred through to PERC. Finally, the report covers the work within the conduct unit and the lists the officers, notes the volume of officers suspended and also subject to restrictions. I know we'll talk further about that later within the closed session. The year concluded with 417 preliminary conduct assessments undertaken, and there is a breakdown there provided to the committee, and also reference to the 34 hearings and 13 meetings that have been scheduled over the year to date last year. I think those were the key points that I wanted to pull out for the committee, and very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, for this run through the report. As always, a very comprehensive update, lots of data. I see, Paul, you would like to come in, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got one or two wee questions. First thing I was looking at on page 9, excuse me, the PSC delivery dashboard, the executive summary makes reference to gross misconducts. It says 34 gross misconducts proceeded. 15 have resigned, and there's only been 8 dismissals, which means that around 1 in 3 have proceeded to a gross misconduct hearing, and it's been found not to be a gross misconduct. Now, considering that's kind of the highest tariff we've got in terms of disciplining someone, that's quite a significant rate of people that we've got to that stage, and it's been found whatever has happened, the spade work before, clearly hasn't been done properly. And I'd just like to get some information or some understanding of what's going on here and what the learning about these cases are.
Thank you very much for the question in relation to the outcome from the gross misconduct hearings. I think there's a number of different reasons in relation to that. I would highlight that a number of them would still be given either final written warnings or verbal written warnings. So a level of misconduct has still been identified in relation to that. Obviously, the important part about the hearing is that it is viewed by an independent chair who makes an assessment on the basis of the information and the case that's been presented, obviously taking into account the subject officer representation through those elements as well in relation to that. And there might be a number of factors that have brought in, potentially witnesses not be willing to attend, and other factors that clearly would impact, therefore, on the chair being able to make that determination, or, as I potentially say, also the subject officer representation. At the moment, we do have the HMICS assurance review in relation to conduct that is ongoing, and I know that that is one of the areas within the tool that's being looked at as well. So obviously, it will be interesting in relation to any findings there. But what I would say is that obviously we continue to assess the cases based on the information, the evidence presented, and at times, obviously, that then gives us the opportunity for the independent chair, whose role it is to make that assessment at that point on the basis of the whole facts presented. But clearly, learning and areas and ways that we can improve and enhance our processes, we continue to make sure that those opportunities are taken.
Okay, no, that's assuring, and it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, HMICS will be able to go into much more depth when they're looking at this than I can as a member of this committee. So look forward to hearing what their view of this is in due course. The next question I've got is on chart 17, the number of suspensions, which seems to be year to date significantly higher than in the past, and similarly with restricted duties. What's the story behind this? Is there a crackdown, or is there anything particular generically leading to this?
Thank you again. I think I will hopefully provide a response to you. I think what we have to remember, and as we know within some of the information and discussion within the second part of this committee, a lot of that relates to off-duty matters in relation to within the suspension area as well, in particular to that. I think we have seen a confidence of people coming forward to report matters, which I think is really positive in relation to that as well. And we do also have a number of significant cases ongoing ongoing at the moment that potentially also has had quite a significant impact in terms of those numbers as well, in relation to that. What I would say is that clearly we have got checks and balances in place in relation to all of these matters, in terms of either the approval of the restriction or the approval of the suspension, and then the 28-day suspension review that's undertaken by the DCC in relation to that, and the restrictions review that is undertaken by the ACC, to make sure that those assessments of either restrictions or suspensions remain proportionate in the circumstances as they develop.
Okay. So there's no generic change of policy or anything like that that's catching people or anything. There's no crackdown specifically.
There's not been any change in relation to policy. As I say, what I am seeing and am pleased to see is that increase in matters that are being reported and coming through. But as I say, we've seen quite a lot in the off-duty area as well. And then we have to see how we can take those learnings and feed them into prevention messages. If you don't mind, I see that the ACC has put her hand up. Would you be happy if she came in as well?
Please.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I suppose it's just really a reiteration of the points that Helen's made. There's been no overt change in policy in terms of thresholds or reasons as to why we would suspend or restrict officers. But I want to give the committee an assurance, and I'm sure you have it already, that as Helen's highlighted, those matters are subject to very stringent reviews. There's a lengthy discussion as to what we think are the most appropriate measures to be put in place, bearing in mind that restrictions are a protective measure. So they're not punitive in any way, but they're intended to look at that conduct, whether it's on or off duty, and make sure that we are protecting both the officer and the public from any threat or risk that may be presented as a result of their alleged conduct or behaviour. And similarly, the suspensions are reviewed on a monthly basis to ensure that actually the thresholds that exist around that are met. And if we see any cause to make any adjustments, we do that. I think it's also important to note that when there's a material change in any case, that automatically triggers either a review of the restrictions or the suspension as is in place. And as Helen's articulated, often cases involve more than one officer. So, for example, Operation Saltwater, which I know the committee are cited on, at one point, we had 8 officers who were involved in that. So very often those numbers are not commensurate with the number of cases, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. The next question I've got is about abandoned cases.
Just a second, Paul. I see Alan just raised his hand. I was wondering if Alan wanted to come in on this point before we move. No?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to give board members a little bit of reassurance in terms of my role in this, and I'm not involved in the actual suspension per se on the occasions that occurs, but my role is reviewing the decisions that are taken around suspension. So there's a degree of independence in terms of having a fresh look at that every 28 days. What I would say back to the volume is probably around 70%, you'll see from the reports, would suggest that those are matters that relate to behaviours that are off duty, and at times incredibly difficult for us to control what's happening in that space.
Very much for that, Alan. Appreciate that. Sorry, apologies. Paul, back to you.
Yeah, no, the next question I've got is about abandoned cases. The numbers of abandoned cases seem to be rather high, and I understand that one of the reasons for that is a lack of contact. Why would that be the case? Why wouldn't we contact people? Why wouldn't you contact people that have lodged complaints?
No, thank you, and I'm happy to come back to the committee at a later date with some further information in relation to that. So this will be where obviously something has been submitted through to us, and then at our attempts to recontact the complainer, we haven't been able to make that contact. And there can be a number of different reasons why that would happen. But I would give the reassurance it's not us not trying to contact the complainer, but whether either information hasn't been provided correctly or information hasn't been provided to us would be probably my immediate observations in relation to that.
So in abandoned cases where you're abandoning the complaint because you can't get hold of the person, and maybe they've moved or whatever, and a withdrawn cases where the complainant withdraws. Right, no, that's very, very helpful. Great, thanks. That's me for the time being, Chair. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Paul. And well, obviously you mentioned the HMICS review into conduct. So really looking forward to seeing the output of that, because exactly as you say, I think that is a deep dive that will provide us with some really valuable insights. And I'm sure there will be some really valid recommendations coming out of that. So yeah, looking forward to that, to seeing that. Okay, Chris, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, colleagues. I've just got one question. Going back to page 6 and complaints, and I wonder if you could comment on the continuing disproportionately high level of complaints in Dumfries and Galloway and Tayside, and I guess what is being done to understand that and respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Who's best placed to answer? Helen, you might be on mute.
Sorry, apologies. I couldn't find the button for the unmute. Apologies. I'm happy again to take that away and bring that back. It has been quite consistently like that over the last number of reports in relation to that. Obviously, what we have done this, I think this started to be included about a year and a half ago in relation to that breakdown per 100 employees by division in relation to the volume. So again, very happy to maybe come back to committee and pull out some of the key trends and data within that. ACC?
Yeah, if I may, just having come into professionalism and assurance from local policing, and obviously these stats there relate to local policing divisions. I would just like to offer some reassurance to the committee that there is very regular engagement between local divisions and professional standards department. Each division has a single point of contact, and there are monthly meetings with the support and service delivery superintendents at division who have responsibility for all PSD related matters. And I can say from personal experience of those meetings, in terms of your question, which is a very apt one, I think, that there is a sort of deep dive, if you like, an understanding, so that we can identify trends within that, so that if there's anything that at local level that we need to address, as I say, at a very localised or departmental or divisional level, we make sure that we're doing that and we feed back into PSD. So as Helen says, we're more than happy to look at those two specific divisions and bring back some information around the increases and what that might relate to. But please be assured that there is local discussion and an understanding at a local level of any points or any learning or anything that they need to address and take on board for officers.
Thank you. Thanks, Helen and Lynn. And I guess, yes, obviously it's helpful for us to understand why that continuing trend is, but it's even more important, as you've recognised, for us to have the assurance that you understand and are following through and dealing with why that might be happening on an ongoing basis.
Thank you for that, Chris, and for the question, for the answers. And some of my questions have already been asked and answered, so that's good. Saves us time. I do have a couple of other questions. I mean, one is around the emerging trends data. And again, obviously, Helen, you did talk us through sort of the emerging trends, I suppose, that you are seeing. And on slide 8, you've broken down the irregularity in procedures by subtype. So I think that's quite helpful as well, because regularity by procedure, we've had this conversation before, covers quite a range of topics. And there are some things that kind of jump out at me, straight away. For example, so the provide insufficient explanation regarding police procedures. This just seems, it seems like there's been a bit of a spike on sort of previous years. And also some of this feels a little bit like you know, something that may be addressable. So something that may well be easier to address than maybe some other things. So, you know, provide insufficient explanation regarding police procedures. It just feels like, okay, well, why don't we, or is there other resources that we can point people to? You know, so that to me feels like one of those relatively easily preventable type of complaints. So just you know, I don't know if you've kind of got a view on this, or if there is some work that could be proactively done in that space. I don't know what your views are on it.
Chair, if I may, I would agree with your observations, and as I say, the team are working to make sure that that is fed through in relation to that, because you know that I agree with the kind of observation that you make, that actually that should be points that we should be able to address and work through. But I see the ACC put her hand up.
Lynn is also looking for the button. You're still on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear now. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I can find the button, but it's not always compliant. Yeah, I think your point in relation to irregularity in procedure is a very appropriate one. It's one of those strange things that I think sometimes when we're engaging with complainers, with reporters, because a process is very obvious to us, I think we're not always as explicit or as comprehensive as we might be in terms of not only explaining what will or may happen next, but also just putting in some reasonable management of expectation around that, so that we're leaving complainers with a sort of clear pathway of what they can expect next and when they can expect it. And you're right, it's something that on the surface of it that ought to be a reasonably easy fix, but one for various reasons at times I think is quite tricky, and it's obviously very difficult to be holistic in terms of how much information we provide in relation to every single process that we have within policing. Also, a number of our processes are actually quite complicated and protracted, so it's a very valid point, and as Helen said, one that we're more than happy to go away, have a look at, and see if that there's more that we can do to simplify that, and more importantly, improve performance in that area.
Thank you very much for that. It is difficult, you know. I appreciate that obviously procedures and processes that Police Scotland is engaged in vary substantially. So I do appreciate that it's probably not quite as easy to fix, but it's just, I suppose, you know, just give them the assurance that whatever you can do to proactively reduce the potential for these types of complaints you're doing. So I think that's good. I'm kind of skipping between screens as well. So another question I had, and you know what, so I've been reflecting on the frontline resolution trends, because this is, again, there's sort of different schools of thought on that. You're absolutely right. I think a lot probably of the complainants, you know, certainly my experience with sort of having had a look at complaints on the NHS side, for example, as well, a lot of the complainants just want a relatively quick and speedy resolution of their complaint. Then there will obviously be other complaints that are more complicated and you know, serious in nature to the degree that they require more in-depth investigation. So, you know, I suppose we do have to recognize that we are dealing with quite a range of complexity, you know, if I may say so, seriousness of complaints. But, you know, I'm thinking, so the frontline resolution number has been hovering around that about 50% mark, I think, for quite a while, and it's been going up and down, but I wouldn't necessarily call that sort of, you know, changes of 1 or 2% are necessarily all that significant. I would be really interested, and maybe this isn't for this committee, so I'm not expecting a fulsome answer at this committee, but I would be really interested in maybe understanding a little bit more about what are the barriers for not having more frontline resolution done. You know, because obviously, again, I'm conscious that the model of handling the complaints changed quite substantially a few years ago, where everything was being brought in-house. And I'm really keen to maybe have a bit of a deep dive on how has this actually worked, you know, in terms of with that move into the centre, has that had any positive or negative impact on the frontline resolution? and maybe just a little bit more thought. I think we really need to delve into this, because if we could drive that number up, I think, it would probably lead to better outcomes for a lot of the people who have complained, for those where things can be resolved quite quickly. But similarly, I would, assume that it would also give your members of the team who are doing the investigations more time to do the more complex complaints, quicker and more robustly. So I'm really keen to kind of see why we're not really seeing that level of frontline resolution shift, and what potentially could be done to maybe shift that, a bit of a reflection on how the new model has maybe performed in this particular area over the last few years. I hope that makes sense as a request. Helen, and then Alan, or maybe the other way around.
Yep. DCC Spears, would you like to go first? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the only person on the call who's maybe around at the time when we're starting to reshape how professional standards work and how we handle complaints. And historically, our early resolution sat about 30%. I think one of the interesting pieces of data during COVID, the resolution levels increased, which I would suspect was driven by expectations. But I think there's a bit of work that we could do, Katerina, to have a closer look at frontline resolution, and look at how we can achieve a greater level of success. You can look at other sectors, particularly away from policing, and you can see an efficient and effective way of handling complaints at an early stage. So I think there's a bit of work that we could do and bring a detailed report back. But I still think, knowing the nature of a lot of the complaints that we do generate, that we should be aiming for a higher level of resolution.
Okay, no, that's really helpful, Alan. Thank you so much for that perspective. Really good. Sorry, who else wants to come in? James.
Hi,
Please.
Chair. Hi, everyone. I'm obviously new in post, just having started a couple of months ago, and I've got the NCARU under myself, and obviously looking for ways to improve and do some benchmarking with other organisations, and kind of refresh things from what people do down south, etc. So happy to take that away and provide a more detailed response at the next committee, if that's an order of yourself.
Of course, James. Welcome. Apologies, I didn't notice this is probably your first committee as well. Then, so welcome.
Thank you.
And yeah, no, it sounds really good. I just feel like just now is a really good time to maybe take stock, and just do a bit of reflective exercise. Helen, you'd like to come back in?
I was just going to say, I think one of the key points about FLR is that the complainer has to be in agreement with the FLR and accept the FLR as the outcome to their complaint, in relation to a suitable resolution for the matter around that. So obviously the member of the public who's contacted us about that obviously has that opportunity to have that say within the FLR matter as well at the moment, as things are. So I think that's an important reflection, that actually if they really want it taken to investigation, clearly that will get taken through. If the explanation that's been provided isn't satisfactory to them, then obviously that would fall into an investigation required, just to highlight that point.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think that's absolutely understood. So we're not saying that we want to shoehorn more complex complaints where, that require investigation into the FLR. It's more about really providing that service and really understanding what are currently the barriers to maybe, having a higher FLR rate indeed. Paul, you would like to come in?
Just to say, I really welcome the commitment from Mr. Spears to look beyond policing at best practice, because my perception of 4 years on the board is often that too often we're looking at other police services, and when there's better practice out there in other sectors. So looking beyond that for this, I think, would be hugely welcome. I want us to shamelessly rip off best practice from somewhere else and improve upon it. And I think there's things out there that we can learn from other sectors. I know the care inspector, when I was chair of that, there was a very strong complaints process about care services, and frontline resolution is massively important. I know the same with the ombudsman, but private sector, etc., are very, very good at dealing with complaints, because if they don't, they're out of business. So I think there's an awful lot of learning we can get from other sectors. So I think that commitment is really excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Paul. Okay, good. Right. Well, thank you for that. I think those were kind of the main points I had. I just wanted to reiterate actually as well that so you know we've talked about, and so the reports keep evolving, and as you can probably tell, hopefully you'll be able to tell that our questions are sharper and more focused as well, and that is due to you providing us the data in a really clear format. I know we talked in the past about trend information being included, and certainly there are some sections of the report where I can see trend information, year-on-year information that is really helpful. So I suppose just a plea again to consider where else trend information would be helpful, particularly where we're not necessarily seeing massive movements in data from quarter to quarter, but that sort of the relationship year on year, I think, is quite important. So I wanted to thank you, I suppose, for including the trend data where it is included, and just re-emphasize that the inclusion of the trend data, etc., was quite important from closing out the Lady Angelini recommendations. So an ongoing request is to consider where more trend information could be provided. I'm sure that you're liaising with Darren on this as well behind the scenes. So more of an observation and a thank you, and a plea for the continuation of really making the data really digestible for us, which we very much appreciate. Okay, that's great. Right, well, I think I see no further hands up. So I think that enables us to then move into the next agenda item, and I see Darren is on screen, and that is the SPA annual report. So Darren, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. This is our regular SPA report. It includes, as usual, the key statistics, initially reflecting the position at the end of Q4 with comparison to the previous 7 quarters. But as you know, at this point in the year, we also provide an annual position, in this instance with trends over the last 6 years. I'll take the paper as read, and if it's okay, I'll focus solely on the annual trends, although happy to pick up anything specifically from a quarterly perspective if required. So looking at the picture over time, so it's important to note that the SPA continues consistently to receive low volumes of complaints and associated allegations generally. And looking at the longer term picture, I'll kind of comment, but probably just to note that this is there was a slight exception in 22-23 where there was a steep drop in complaints and allegations. So bear that in mind as I kind of talk about the longer term trends. So 2024-25 did see a slight increase in relevant complaints and allegations compared to last year, but actually the longer term trend has seen a gradual reduction in both. When we look at the subject of complaints, Police Scotland senior officers, so Assistant Chief Constable and above, continues to account for the majority of complaints and allegations, albeit within that context of low numbers generally. And numbers are broadly consistent over time. Complaints about the SPA or the SPA's workforce, including forensic services, again, numbers remain consistently low. In terms of allegations themselves, the majority continue to be in the on-duty category, again with numbers broadly consistent over time. And in respect of quality of service allegations, from a high in 2019-20, again, numbers have remained consistently low since. Looking at the determination of complaints, so previously for the last 2 years, we saw that all allegations were able to be resolved by what we call early stage resolution, but the equivalent of frontline resolution that we've heard discussed earlier today. 24-25 actually saw a greater number of allegations requiring formal determination. However, over the longer term reference period provided, approximately a quarter of the cases were able to be resolved in that informal early stage resolution approach. And of those that did require formal determination, 11% of allegations were upheld. In terms of complaint closure timescales, with the exception of 2021 and of last year, average closure times have remained below the 40 working day or 56 calendar day reference period set out within the PERC statutory guidance. I would comment that whilst last year did see a notable increase, albeit below the earlier high of 96 days in 2017-18, this should be considered in the context of the number of cases that required formal determination and the nature of the same. And within our report, we provide high-level summary of the circumstances that caused those delays. In terms of other matters included within the broader covering report, I would note that we undertook a review of our unacceptable, persistent or unreasonable actions policy, and following committee approval, that revised policy has been published. The team, following some recent recruitment, we intend to resume our dip sampling of Police Scotland closed complaints this year. So an initial review of cases closed in Q1 is planned, and we will report the findings of that dip sample to the next meeting of the committee. As you know, we also use this report to provide details of the National Complaint Handling Development Group, chaired by Police Scotland and attended by ourselves and PERC. The group met on the 1st of May, chaired by James Mann, and is due to meet again on the 20th of August. I would just note, probably in light of comments from Paul earlier around about engagement with other bodies, there has been some initial engagement over the recent period with the IOPC, with the Pony and with the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, but clearly that group provides additional opportunity to see what we can learn, as mentioned by DCC from other bodies potentially out with policing. I recently attended Police Scotland's Glade Gold Group in April, and I note that we're due to discuss that later in the meeting. And then lastly, I would just note that I'm having ongoing engagement with colleagues in Police Scotland in respect of the wider committee work plan. So noting the addition of new thematic annual reports that the committee have discussed recently, and the potential to review the proportionality of data reporting frequency. So what needs to come to the committee on a quarterly basis versus what is appropriate and important to come actually on a less frequent and particularly annual basis when we talk about key trends and insights. So that was everything I intended to cover off. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. And before I invite colleagues to ask any questions, I think you just touched on that there. So actually it was an oversight on my part. So just for the public record, when we talked about decisions taken in the interim, there had actually been a decision that we've taken the update to the unacceptable, persistent or unreasonable actions by complainers policy. So the decision was taken by correspondence. So I just to put it on the record, and then back into this agenda item. So are there any questions for Darren on the SPA report? I see none. Thank you very much for that report then, Darren. No questions for you. And I don't have any questions either. So which enables us then to move on to the next agenda item, which is 5, and that's the PERC annual report on Police Scotland handling of complaints and investigation referrals. And I see Ilya on screen. So Ilya, we're passing over to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. I'll provide a quick overview of the Q4 and the annual figures from the PERC's perspective. I'll take the report as read. I'll just maybe pull out some key highlights. In Q4, you'll see we received 56 CHR applications, which is very similar to the rate of applications in Q2 and Q3, slightly up on Q1 of this financial year. In total, 217 applications were received for complaint handling reviews, which related specifically to Police Scotland. You'll see that there is a natural drop in the number of the applications. Generally, that was anticipated. I think with the number of the complaints being concluded by the Police Scotland being reduced this year, we anticipated a slight reduction in those applications. Further down the report, you'll see 197 files, complaint files were requested from Police Scotland during this financial year. The average timescale for provision of those papers was 6.7 working days, which is very encouraging. 92% of the files were provided within the 15 working days timescale. Majority of the files within, apologies, majority of the files that we received required further information requests. Those in quarter 4 were slightly longer than anticipated, on average 16 working days. However, for the year-end figure, you'll see that those papers were provided within 12, 13 working days, which again within the agreed timescale. So that's again a positive figure to highlight. In quarter 4, we concluded, I believe, 30 CHR cases specifically relating to Police Scotland, with additional 33 cases concluded by the discretionary decisions. Overall, our data shows that 60% of the complaints we reviewed were handled to a reasonable standard. There are significant variations in terms of the regional performance within PSD. I think it would be fair to highlight that PSD East has performed really well this year, consistently demonstrating performance well over 70% reasonably handled. So that's very encouraging. And we'll try to work with PSD to make sure that we can try to replicate that across other regions. In terms of the quarter 4 specific performance, you'll see 52% of the complaints we reviewed were handled to a reasonable standard. So in terms of comparison with the previous year, I think 57%, which was last year's figure. So certainly slight improvement on that, but we're still trying to reach the heights that we managed to achieve 2 years ago when we had 74%. So still working towards that. In terms of the recommendations in total, we made 179 recommendations over the course of the year. You'll see that the predominant category within that is further inquiries, which amounts to just over 50%, and reassess and provide further response was the second main category, which amounted to about 27% of all the recommendations we made. 37 learning points were identified within the CHR reports in quarter 4. We provided a breakdown of those within the report. I do not believe there were any significant organisational learning points identified, but more about identification, good complaint handling practice, about appropriate use of frontline resolution, and a few others, and you can see a more detailed breakdown there. For significant organisational learning points on page 15 of the report, we're still liaising with Police Scotland in terms of trying to implement those learning points, which in our view are very significant as they relate to key amendments to guidance and SOPs, which in our view needs to be progressed without delay, because you can see that those have been outstanding for almost 2 years now. The report provides detail of our engagement with PSD. You'll see that we delivered a training input together with our PSD colleagues to the new complaint handlers in February, at the end of February of this year. And the report also highlighted that at the end of April, we held a further training event specifically designed for new complaint handlers who recently started within a professional standards department. Darren has highlighted the meeting of the National Complaint Handling Development Group, so I don't intend to revisit that. We provided an update on the 6-stage audit, specifically implementation of the 4 recommendations. The other 6 recommendations remain outstanding. We were hoping that 4 could be discharged in time for this meeting, but unfortunately that was delayed slightly. Again, I think the key recommendation to highlight to the committee is naturally recommendation 8 of the report, which asked Police Scotland to revisit the process, identify demand versus a staff ratio and so on. So that was initially delayed to allow Police Scotland to gather sufficient data for the analysts to be able to undertake that work. I understand we are now at the position where that data should be available, so we will be liaising with our colleagues to try to get that recommendation implemented given the current timescales and the backlogs. And that's probably the highlights from my part of the report. I'm happy to pause at this stage to take any questions, or if the chair, if you prefer, I can pass on to my colleague Raymond to speak to the second part.
Thank you very much, Lee. As always, there's a lot of information that you pack into your report and to your presentation. So thank you. We'll give you a breather and I'll maybe pass on to Raymond first, and then we can take any questions together at the end. So Raymond, please. Oh, and you're on mute.
Common problem today, I feel. Morning, folks. I'll take the document as read, and I'll probably pick up where Helen commented on around about Article 3 matters. I believe she referenced the number 347 in relation to that. So I mentioned at the last meeting we have changed our operating model to align with the Lord Advocate's reference and the change in corroboration round about the law. So since January of this year, we are now taking on the majority of these Article 3 referrals to investigations. So it's a stark change in the investigation space in regards to that. So it's a massive demand challenge for us as we go forward. So it was just to reference that back into the committee to allow them to understand what that means when Police Scotland are referring them. So that is something just to put on the record for that. In terms of the report in general, there's nothing I would seek to highlight in terms of Q4 figures, but when we reflect back across the years, there's a couple of things, or the year rather, a couple of things I'll probably just pull out for your information, particularly in relation to firearms. You see the 24% increases is cited there. The major driver for that is obviously PAVA and Taser, with Taser being a piece of equipment that's getting rolled out and increased use accordingly. More significantly, the firearms discharge element, you'll see that has increased from 3 last year to 9, 3 the previous year to 9 last year. These relates to the dispatch of animals, and we actually looked at 3 in full investigation status, which again were for that reason. These were in relation to pretty much emerging trends. We've seen dangerous dogs in the community, as you'll probably have seen in the media. So that piece of work enabled us to feedback some recommendations to Police Scotland that they acted upon, and I believe to good effect going forward with that. The other matter that Helen touched on, I'll build on as well, is the serious injury following police contact. There's a significant increase there. It's went from 28 to 53. Helen touched on some of the drivers for that. Why that would be. I think it's a confidence piece in terms of, although that's going up, we're seeing the process being followed in terms of referrals, which is good. But to give the committee some reassurance, only 4 of the 53 were deemed suitable and necessary for investigation. So that ratio is very low. So it shows that, you know, whilst they're being referred, it's only the absolute minority that require to be further explored in that regard. Moving through the paper, I spoke previously about the recommendations section. There's been quite a bit of work on both sides regarding that to expedite the recommendations quicker, and you'll see through the passage of time that is happening. We have no outstanding recommendations at this time. The one that's on the document is pretty much self-explanatory and is probably one of the longer running ones given the complexity, but that has resolved. So good to see that piece of work, and hopefully we can carry that on going forward into the next year. In terms of the closure aspect, I was touched on the Lord's Advocate's reference, which is an unprecedented change in demand as well. The key piece going forward, I suppose, is body-worn video to understand what that looks and feels like as we move forward. So as that rolls out, we'll be able to get a better understanding of that. And for the information of the committee, there is ongoing dialogue at executive level between Police Scotland and the PIRC to shape up that process as it moves forward. And that indeed is all positive. And to conclude in some positive news, it's featured on quite a few of the updates over the piece, is the MOU between Police Scotland and PIRC. That is now at the final stages. Due to the passage of time, there's some final amendments that probably need to be made and shared, but I think we're quite confident now that that will be signed at this end and passed back to Police Scotland for the appropriate signatory at that side. So a lot of hard work went into that, which should conclude in the very near future. But other than that, there's not really anything I'd seek to draw out in the document on this occasion, but open to questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Raymond. Also, similarly, a lot of interesting data there as well in your report. I see, Paul, you would like to come in.
Yeah, I'm just sorry if you've touched on this in your remarks, Raymond. It's that sort of almost 25% increase in referrals from Police Scotland. How much of that is related to Taser and Taser being rolled out? Does that cover all of it, or?
I couldn't say for definite without having a dive into the actual data to go through it, but I think it correlates with the increase in equipment provision to the officers. It's running in tandem from what our observations would be without doing a detailed analysis. And I believe that would be expected because it's obviously a tactic that Police Scotland would use in certain circumstances. And when we do assess them, there's a very few of them actually go to investigations. So by way of confidence going back the way, that would probably, that would hopefully give you the confidence that that piece of kit and equipment is being used in line with the training and guidance that's delivered to the officers.
And those officers in the past wouldn't have had tasers, so they would have been dealing with the suspect in a different way. They wouldn't necessarily require a referral to PIRC. Is that?
No. I mean, tasers are a relatively new piece of kit, albeit it's been about for some time, but the rollout's obviously progressive. Before then, they'd use other options, whether it be their other officer safety equipment there. So that trend is probably to be expected with the increase in provision.
Yeah, but where I'm coming from is the other officer kit that they would use wouldn't require a Police Scotland referral to PIRC when they're using that, whereas Taser does. Sorry?
Harbour would, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you for that. Lynn, did you want to come in on this point?
I did, Chair, but I think I think Raymond's addressed it. It absolutely is correct that it would be alternative methods. At the upper end of the spectrum, it would be firearms if we were dealing with someone who had a weapon, and that would necessitate a PIRC referral. But at the other end of the spectrum, the other equipment that we have, bat and handcuffs, and hands for fend-offs and TAC comms, wouldn't require a referral to PIRC.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. And Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you again, colleagues, for the report. I'm just going to page 15, and Ilya, you highlighted this issue of outstanding organisational learning points, on which your report refers to ongoing liaison with Police Scotland, and I wonder if colleagues could comment further on progress and the nature of that liaison and when we could expect to see that shifting. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's best placed to provide an update on that? Helen, please.
Sorry, I have put my hand up. I don't know if Ilya would like to come in first or if he's happy for me to comment from a Police Scotland perspective. I would like to give the reassurance to the committee that these are all bits of work in progress and we are working through and actually working practices. So, for example, if I pull out the third one around the amendment to suspension from duty stop, that has been kind of in terms of our working practice has been implemented. It's actually just the policy change in the background behind it, and in terms of the SOP and the guidance, that is just taking a little bit more time to work through, partly because we are actually amending some of the other sections within it as well, and therefore the consultation. So what I'd like to give the reassurance to the committee that they are all bits of work in progress. We have taken the immediate implications and changes that we can put in place, and then the majority of the rest we're following up in terms of the process and the policy around it, which is taking us longer in relation to that, if that addresses and hopefully provides a bit of reassurance to the committee. But again, I'm happy to try and or to prepare a bit more detail, and hopefully Ilya would reflect that the engagement is there. We just haven't got to the point of signing them all off.
Yeah, Chair, I can confirm the engagement is there. I think from our perspective, because those issues have been identified almost 2 years ago now, as you can see in May and July 2023, I think we expected that the guidance documents would be able to be updated by this point. I understand the point that Helen's making. Certainly the suspension from duty SOP, I understand that there is a much wider review of that SOP. That's understandable, albeit regrettable that it's taking so long to implement. I think the second bullet point, undoubtedly the committee will agree, is a quite significant one, especially in the current climate, and that's something again that we were hoping that the guidance could be put in place much quicker. It's not really for me to advise the committee on the difficulties in implementation from Police Scotland side, but I understand that in many regards, whilst professional standards may undertake what they need to undertake to try to get the policy amended, perhaps in other departments within Police Scotland, the matters are not progressing as quickly as we would anticipate.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, Helen, you'd like to come back in, please.
If I can, just and pulling out for that second one, again, you know, the working practices are definitely in place around that one. I'm very comfortable in terms of the level of discussion that takes place and that insurance of the independence of allocation of investigation, whether that be into another division or into PSD if that was appropriate. So that does take place. Again, I will go away and reflect in exactly where that is within the guidance, and we will try and work that one through as a priority.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Helen. That's really welcome. Thank you, Chris, for the question. Okay, so no, thank you, colleagues. I am also mindful that we still have got one open action on our last time we spoke about this, which was around the revision to the law for corroboration and the wide implications on policing. I think, again, Raymond, you just touched on it there again, basically, you know, stating that there will be an impact on you in terms of the demand. And Helen, I think the action is still with you around that kind of, you know, ensuring that the full SPA board are cited in this. So I would probably just say that it would be good to have that completed ahead of the next committee that we have. You know, if a report can be made available, then it can be circulated to all board members. Again, I would just encourage you to work with our officers, our SPA staff. I mean, we do, you know, because we as a committee don't need to see the report first. I'd say, you know, at this stage, I'm just quite keen to get everybody on the SPA board, I think, cited, because we have got knowledge of this. We've been discussing this now, but yeah, I'm quite keen to kind of get the colleagues updated and possibly a bit more detail on the implications of this from a Police Scotland perspective. So if that could be sort of progressed, that would be really helpful. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, right. Well, I see no further questions. So I would propose at this stage, because we have been going for over an hour and I am in desperate need of a cup of tea. So I'm going to propose that maybe we just have a very, very quick break, maybe reconvene again at 11:20, and then we will be straight into Operations Glade update, I believe. Yeah. And that then, yeah. So why don't we reconvene at 20 past, colleagues? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being back with cups of tea, I can see. So that's good. Makes me feel better. I'm not the only one who is in constant need of something hot to drink. So we are all back. And without any further ado, as I already indicated, we are going into agenda item 6, which is the operational Glade update. So I think, Lynn, you're introducing this one. Over to you, please.
Chair, I am. Thank you. Just checking. Can you hear me? Perfect. Thanks. So, Chair, I was going to introduce Superintendent James Mann, who, as you know, is on the call, but he's already done that. So, with your indulgence, I'll take the report as read, if I may. I'll give a little bit of a strategic update from my perspective, and then hand over to James to cover off any of the sort of tactical or operational points that he wants to draw to the committee's attention. So, I took over the portfolio probably about 5-6 weeks ago, and I was already aware, and indeed DCC Spears was very quick to tune me into not only the significant focus and amount of work that had already been done in respect of Operation Glade, but also the interest and oversight that the committee had shown in relation to this. And I think, as you referenced earlier, Chair, this is very much about better outcomes, and that's where the focus needs to be. So I think from my perspective, I was really keen to get an understanding of the situation, but also I see my role as a sort of fresh set of eyes and a fresh perspective to an extent, to try and offer a little bit of constructive challenge, if I might put it in those terms, just around what's been done previously. And there's no question it's been a mammoth piece of work, but it's proven to be a wicked problem, and I take my hat off to colleagues who've progressed it thus far, and grateful for the support of the committee in terms of doing that. So, as I say, from a strategic perspective, there are a number of things that I've put in place. So Darren referenced earlier the goal group meetings, which I intend to have on a much more regular basis. And if the date's not in the diary for the next one, it will be shortly. But also I'm chairing a weekly meeting around OpGlade, which is internally focused, just to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to drive forward for these better outcomes that we've referenced. There's a refreshed terms of reference being drafted up by myself, and we're also working on an Operation Glade roadmap, which outlines what we aim to do in the short, medium and long-term time frame, and that includes some of the measures that have already been outlined in the report, in terms of the task force, a bit of overtime spend, etc., to try and drive things down and maintain that slightly downward trajectory that we see, to some benchmarking. I noted with interest Paul's update earlier on in terms of the care inspectorate and complaint handling. We'll certainly take an opportunity to look at that, and also building in some review as well. We've also developed in the last couple of weeks a new baseline reporting structure to make sure that we are consistently week on week comparing like with like, because I think that's crucially important. And also we've spoken a little bit about the categories, not just the categorisation of the complaints into the A+, A, B and C, but also the pots, if you like, that they are allocated into. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we're getting those categories of complaint right, because we talked earlier about we shouldn't be seeking to force something down a frontline resolution solution if that's not appropriate. And I don't get any sense that we are doing that. I know that we're not, but actually, for example, is everything that's in the category A+ category, the category A, should it be there? Is it in the correct pot? And likewise, as I say, for those that are works in progress. So I think, in short, that there's some cause for optimism in the sense that the unallocated complaints are down since the last meeting. We have recruited all 25 now of the civilian investigators, and the training for them is all but complete, and they have been deployed to help us manage this particular workload. The new complaints waiting assessment are down round about 100. the unallocated inquiries are reduced. And as I say, we've built in review to look at that in what will now be 2 months' time to actually understand the bits of that that are working well that we can maybe expand a little, and the bits that we need to fine tune and adjust. So in summary, there is a slight downward trajectory in terms of overall all numbers allocated and work in progress, which has improved. We need to, the strategic focus is to continue that trajectory in the right direction, if that makes sense, and find a way through the course of the coming months to get us into a position whereby we're almost at I say ground zero, not zero, but we get to a position that we are comfortable accepting that there will always be some throughput in the cap space, and it's ambitious, but as I say, I think there's some cause for optimism there. So I wanted first and foremost to give the committee an assurance around our collective commitment to it, my personal focus around it, and if I may, I'll bring in James, who, since he came into the department a couple of months ago, I'm not going to say he's focused on nothing else, but it's certainly consumed a significant amount of his time. And James, without putting you in the spot, it might be helpful if you could just give a little bit more of the specifics in terms of the rearranged working arrangements in and around Opglade. Thanks.
No problem, ma'am. Just a commitment from myself that I'm absolutely resolute to the board members in terms of getting the unallocated queue down. Obviously, I know it's not an acceptable position to be sitting with around about 1,000 unallocated complaints is what we've had for obviously some time and what we still have just now. So I've an absolute commitment from myself that we've got a number of things ongoing, working with partners at Park and SPA. We've already had really encouraging meetings with Darren and Ilya, and happy to have discussions with others one-to-one around the committee on some ideas and how we push things forward. So you have that commitment for the time that I am here. I will push that on and focus the team and ask the right supportive and intrusive questions of the team to make sure we're doing everything we can to deliver a good service, obviously, for the public of Scotland. So some short-term, medium-term and long-term actions that we've got ongoing. The ACC's touched on quite a few of them. The kind of short-term ones, we're going to continue to support our new civilian investigators in terms of training and mentorship. We've seen quite a few of them hit the ground running, but mainly the ones with police experience. The ones without police experience are taking a wee bit of time, obviously, to get up to speed. They're being mentored a bit closer with people who are experienced from the team. We're using some overtime and redeploying some people from other areas of professionalism insurance who have BSD experience. We're continuing to use sort of days of action, and when I say days of action, it's people within PSD that are being allocated some complaints and use overtime to try and focus the mind on getting some more from the unallocated queue out for investigation. The ACC mentioned the kind of weekly progress report, so I've started a weekly reporting on a Thursday so that I can see what each team are getting through and what they're being allocated out. So it's a kind of single version of the truth, if you like. One of my frustrations when I came in was there was data from all different areas and I couldn't quite get a grasp on what the allocated was for each team, because there's different teams across the country. So now we've got that in place. It will allow us by next committee to show a real trend and where we're going, and I'll probably put a bit more detail in the Opglade report for next time. Medium term, I'm exploring the use of analysts. I worked in a data role for the police in a previous job. I've got a good relationship with analysts within the organisation, so we're looking to use them to understand a lot more detail in what's in the unallocated list. And then when we understand more of what's in it, we can then look at theming things and hopefully tackling things a bit more efficiently for the public. We've mentioned the benchmarking, so I've made contact with the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, obviously linking in with the Complaint Handling Development Group. We're looking to reach out to other organisations and get some inputs done at the August meeting in terms of best practice. I've also got some meetings ongoing with the continuous improvement team from Police Scotland in terms of reviewing our end-to-end processes and sort of an independent view on how we do things in the non-criminal sphere. And then if we do some workshops, we can then look at how do we create efficiencies and make the team here work more efficiently, and therefore drive improvements in the unallocated list. So that's the kind of short and medium term. Long term, obviously we'll review our business case in terms of the new civilian staff investigators, and obviously continue to work with collaborative partners like PERC and yourselves at SPA and local policing divisions in terms of identifying any trends and root causes of complaints and how we can move things forward. So it's just a wee flavour of things that I've tried to push forward since I've started, and obviously give you that commitment that I'll do everything I can to drive things forward in terms of Operation Blade.
Chair, we're happy to take any questions you may have.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn and James, for the report and for your presentation. I see, Paul, you would like to come in, please.
Yeah. One observation and one question, Chair. And the observation is that, I mean, this is a report that's of immense importance publicly. But unless you're the cognoscenti, you wouldn't know what Operation Blade refers to. It's not mentioned in the report. It's not mentioned in the title. And actually, that's a generic problem I should have picked up in the various committee effectiveness sessions and board effectiveness sessions I've done since joined this board, that too often they refer to an operation and we're expected to know what it means. And I have to confess that I don't always know what these operations are always referring to, and I have to go and find out from some other means. These are public reports that the general public should be able to read and understand what on earth is going on. So it's just a generic thing. Can we please get some qualification in the title or in the introduction as to what the operation in question in a report relates to? And my question is kind of picking up on, I think, the last few points you were making, Helen, about the backlog. What is an acceptable level of waiting lists or waiting time that you're aiming for, and how long do you reckon it's going to take you to get there?
So I'll take, if I may, the point that you made about outlining what the operation refers to. So that's absolutely a fair point, and we will absolutely undertake to do that in the next report. So there will never be a time at which the complaints will be at zero, because it takes time to work through. But having looked at this, what I did see was a number of years ago, and we talked earlier a little bit about before we moved into the New World Order, which has undoubtedly brought some benefits in terms of the professionalisation and the consistency of complaint handling. Because prior to that, the vast majority of complaints were investigated by inspectors, of whom I was one, who had a day job at division, and they were doing them over and above their day job, if you like. And in that period, the numbers that were generally in the system looked at around about 300 nationally. And obviously they're at various stages in the process. So taking this in bite-sized chunks, given the scale and the gravity of the problem, aspirationally, that's a figure that I would like to drive it down to. Clearly, if we can go beyond that, and I don't want to sort of nail my colours to the mast on that specifically, but I would like to get this down to the low hundreds, given the size and scale of the complaints landscape, and the numbers that we will always have in the system. In terms of timescales, I'll be honest, I think that's quite difficult to assess, and I'll bow to any input from colleagues who've been in around this longer than I have. But I know from my personal experience in the operational environment, the factors that impact on the number of complaints into the system is relatively unpredictable. So, for example, I was previously Divisional Commander in Greater Glasgow Division. There were a number of protests over the course of last year, each of which generated in excess of 120 complaints against the police. Those take a significant amount of time to work through. So it would be folly, I think, for me to say this is achievable in 6 months, 12 months, etc., because it's unknown in terms of the flow that's going to come in. But what I will say is, as I've outlined already, the aspiration is that month on month, we will continue with the downward trajectory. As I say, nearly 300 down in terms of the overall numbers since the last meeting. My ambition in the short to medium term is to sustain that downward trend. And yeah, as I say, I would love to be able to say to you, I think I'll do it, or we will do it collectively within a certain time frame. But be assured that we will bring obviously regular updates back to committee. As James has alluded to, I would expect those, and indeed those will be, a bit more diverse and a bit more inclusive in terms of the information that we're able to provide, because I do think that we're beginning to get a better handle on what the trends are, what the numbers are, and what sits where, if that makes sense.
Up to a point, I'm assured that you've got a figure there that you're kind of working towards. I'm less assured that all you can say is that you hope that it will be a downward trajectory. I would hope it would be a downward trajectory. There's no point in Operation Glade if there isn't a downward trajectory. That's what it's been set up for. What I'm looking for is an idea of, is this going to be a year, 2 years, 5 years to eat into that backlog? And yeah, I understand that there are other complaints that are going to add to what we've got, but it's still, there's been significant resource pumped into this to try and get this situation turned around, and I would expect something to be, some picture of how many you're being able to clear off going forward. So it does concern me, because I'm not getting an assurance that we're going to get to that 300 figure at any point, let alone anytime soon.
So, well,
I'm saying, where I'm coming from is I think you're being overcautious in your presentation to us. I can understand why.
Apologies. So, from my perspective, I really think I've mentioned already the 3-month review that we would seek to do in and around the reshaping that we've done over the course of the last few weeks. So I think the next 3 to 6 months will give us a much better indication, given that we have got one of the significant developments is the 25 civilian investigators that we have recruited and we've got in post. It's too early yet to see what impact that will have. However, in 3 months and in 6 months' time, we will have a much better sense of the impact of that and the other measures that myself and James have alluded to. So if you would give me some forbearance and allow me to do that review in the 3-month period, and undertake that when I come back to committee in the next quarter, I can give some feedback on that and some views on the impact and what that might mean in terms of the overall timeframes for this work.
Great. Okay, we'll wait and see then. Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's me, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. And James, I see you would like to come in.
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's just to add some more context. So the problem that I see at the moment is that the new complaints coming in from Incaru to non-criminal are coming in at a steady rate, and what the team are getting through are closing off at a steady rate. So what I'm trying to do and put measures in place is to speed up what the team are doing and sort of maybe remove some levels of internal processes to create more efficiency, to hopefully double the speed in what things are getting done here, so we create the churn removed from the unallocated list, rather than one getting fed in and one getting closed off, if you know what I mean. So I'm looking to get the team working as efficiently as possible without obviously putting a lot of pressure on individuals as such, and hopefully that will assist, because the complaints come in from Incaru on a pretty steady basis, on a daily basis from what I can see.
Thank you for that, James. And Alan, you'd like to come in?
Thanks, Chair. I probably just wanted to acknowledge Paul's comments and say from the organisational perspective, pretty much agree with your assessment. Paul, there's a range of things that we have tried and steps that we've taken that thus far have had limited benefit. So I think just again, give you a bit of assurance, I'm looking for weekly updates. I'm briefing the Chief on a weekly update. And it's been a matter that's been raised politically. So you can be assured that if in the coming weeks we're not seeing a level of progress that we want, then we'll look to take further steps to address this. And a lot of the steps that we've tried to take over the last 12 or 18 months, quite frankly, haven't worked. So I would just be probably really candid in terms of agreeing entirely with your views and just giving you an assurance that it is very topical and it's under sort of weekly reviews. And I think with Lynn coming into post, it was useful for me and James to give them just that tiny little bit of time. But I think this was the very first conversation I had with Lynn on her appointment. So again, by the next committee, if the progress that you would expect to see, and I would expect to see, isn't there, you can be assured that I'll be talking to you about a plan that will help us really address this from a different perspective. We're desperately trying to retain the model because the quality of what we're doing within PSD is so much stronger. But I think, I will ensure that at the next committee between yourself and Lynn will be really robust in what steps we're taking.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for that, Alan. I think a really good conversation, and really appreciate kind of the candidness around this, because that's, I think, it's just an accurate summary. I do want to acknowledge the effort that went into trying to resolve this over the last year, Lynn. So I would very much like to echo kind of, your comments that you made at the start. We have seen over time that attention and investment flowing into this area. So that is acknowledged, but similar as Alan just said, it doesn't seem to have had that much of an impact to date. I do appreciate you're having another go at this. So obviously Lynn's in post, James is in post. But and I think you have acknowledged the fact that there is a degree of urgency around this now. And I think again nobody's trying to hide that. So as James, as Lynn, as you said, so a degree of forbearance. I understand you need some time to see if this latest iteration of initiatives is going to start having desired impact. Just something, a comment I had, James, you mentioned there, obviously, and we have discussed this, I'm pretty sure at the last committee, the fact that absolutely there will be new complaints coming in all the time. So it's not, so as you're trying to drain a bathtub of that backlog, the bathtub is being filled up from the top probably as quickly as you're draining this. And that's why, if I remember correctly, at the last committee meeting, we very much spoke about the fact that it would be really helpful to have the data disaggregated, so that we understand exactly what's happening with the backlog, because there's timelines around that, but we can also see exactly what's happening to the new complaints that are received. Because as Paul alluded to, we're also always interested, not just how long have the cases been sitting in the backlog and what, what's the trajectory for the draining of it, of that bathtub, but we're also interested in the new complaints that are coming in, how long it takes to resolve them. So that BAU acceptable standard, I think that Paul was discussing. So it sounds like you are taking the right steps around really using analysts, trying to understand what's in there, trying to, so say, not just have more bodies on it, but also work in smarter ways. And I think that is definitely welcomed. I think for the committee, what will be really important is that commitment to regular updates. So I'd suggest that we put that on the agenda as an ongoing item, with maybe an explanation title of Operation Glade stroke something, so that ordinary members of the public can understand what we're talking about. So standing agenda item, really, I think quite disaggregated reporting as far as possible. And we do understand that sometimes the systems are not necessarily conducive to that, but I think, it would be really helpful. And I think it's really helpful from a management perspective, not just from a governance perspective for us. I'm sure, James, you've mentioned the fact that it's about data and it's about really understanding, having that holistic view of what's in that bathtub that's being drained. So that's good. I also, and then I'll bring it in a second. I also know that, you know, Alan, you mentioned the model, you know, the model working, and I absolutely understand that bringing it into centrally increases the quality and those centers of excellence. And I've seen that work really well elsewhere. So I think we can all understand the rationale as to why this was done. And, you know, Helen, you're kind of, sorry, not Helen, Lynn, your commentary there around, in the previous model, it was done on the side of the desk or on top of the duties. So, you know, I think intuitively we can all understand why potentially, you know, bringing into the essential model, it's a better thing. But we did touch a little bit earlier on the frontline resolution kind of process. And I know that some conversations have been had around potentially commissioning an audit into the complaints handling space. So I'm not, you know, I'm looking at Alan. I think, Alan, you will have had some conversations with SPA members of staff. So we're basically really keen, I think, at giving you the support that you require. You know, an audit can be quite beneficial also from a really a bit of an assessment perspective. You know, because again, the auditors will be coming in with their own expertise. So I haven't had an update yet as to where we are with that, but I know conversations have been had, because exactly as everybody has acknowledged, this is an increasing area where we're in a bit of a spiral, and we do need to have something that breaks that cycle and helps the organization rebalance the workload, the effort, and, you know, give ultimately, you know, as we said, it's about better outcomes for the public and higher levels of public confidence. So I'm going to pause for breath now. I see that Lynn, you'd like to come in, and Alan, you've got your hand up as well. So please, Lynn.
I'll let, excuse me, DCC Spears come in first, if I may, because I think he may have an update in relation to the audit, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, just very briefly, Catherine. So I've spoken to some colleagues at the SPA, and we have agreed, unanimously agreed that, and I think my understanding is when it went off for a few days last week, we're just finalising a terms of reference. So we could probably, in the margins of today's committee, provide an update to board members just around that. But I would be hopeful that would push on in the coming days.
Fantastic. No, I think that would be really helpful. Okay, thank you. And Lynn?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just very briefly, I also agree. I think that's really helpful. I very much welcome it. And I think just to reinforce the point that James and you made around the need, if you like, to understand, to build into it almost the prevention piece. So there is a bit around that analytical work to understand and identify, or better identify, where we've got trends. We spoke earlier about that irregularity of procedure bit, and identify opportunities where we can, in the most wholesome of senses, design out complaints by making sure that we are making contact, that we are offering updates, that we are providing context in terms of our procedures and processes, and identifying trends that we can tackle and address, in order that, as you say, the bath water the bath is filling up at a slower level than it is right now, so that in both sides of the equation, we've got one side that is driving down the backlog, but what's coming into the system is also slowing as well, so that we reach that equilibrium at that kind of business as usual numbers. But take on board all the comments. Most grateful for the support and the forbearance of the committee, and we will bring a much more detailed update to next committee. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you so much, everybody. Good, you've got your work cut out. Good luck, and really looking forward to the next report. Okay, right, I see no further hands up, so this enables us to go into our next agenda item, which is the Police Ethics, Conduct and Scrutiny Scotland Bill update. And again, I believe it's Lynn and Helen who will be talking to this agenda item, please.
Yep. Thank you very much, Chair. It's myself that's going to cover this. I don't intend to dwell too long on the paper because it is really just provided to the committee to provide an overview of the work that has been progressing as we prepare for the commencement of the PECS Act in relation to the work. So the paper does outline the different considerations and the steps as we work towards developing the training and the understanding and awareness across the organisation, but a lot of it is dependent on sort of secondary legislation that will come in later to the initial commencement that is due at the end of this month. So we are working towards that. I think of particular note, I would just highlight the next kind of engagement and discussions with the authority will be around the Code of Ethics or requesting that respectfully. Obviously, the Act does require the Chief to consult and engage with the authority in respect to the development of the Code of Ethics, and that is very much the focus and the priority of the team at the moment as we work through. There's also a list of consultees that we will then go on and engage with as part of the development of the Code of Ethics for policing in Scotland. But as I say, our first point of call, we are keen to engage with the authority, and Darren and I have been speaking about how we will coordinate and manage that over the next little while to continue the preparation of the code moving forward. So I don't think there was anything else that I really wanted to touch on, Chair, other than to give the reassurance to the committee that the work continues at pace around this, moving towards the commencement of this currently scheduled for the end of this month.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report and for this introduction. Are there any questions on this item? I see none. I don't have any questions. I think it's, as I say, a very clear report and just good to have that update to see all the effort that goes into preparing for this bit of legislation coming live. Okay, right. Well, if there's no questions, that enables us to move to the last agenda item in the public session of the committee, which is the committee work plan. And I know, Darren, we've touched slightly on the committee work plan. Darren touched on it slightly as part of the update that we delivered earlier today. And so we obviously do have that ongoing action there. So far the plan, I think, looks like it looked last time we looked at it. But obviously Darren has provided an update on the fact that there is work happening behind the scenes to exactly examine what is the optimum model for this. And, you know, I'm just quite conscious of the fact that obviously, Lynn, you being new in post as well, I think this is a really good time just now to step back, have a look at it, and come up with something that really, you know, satisfies our governance needs and the public interest. But at the same time, we're always quite conscious that we do not want to ask for things or see things more frequently than we need to, because we are all aware of the fact that resources are finite, and we know how we know of the demand on Police Scotland sort of across a number of different areas. So yeah, this is all I was going to say on this, unless there's any questions. I'm looking at Darren if there's anything else that is to be said about this at this stage, but I think that's where everybody's quite clear on where we are with this. I see no hands up. Okay, right. So this enables us to finish the public session. Colette, I'm looking at